You won't regret it, I promise. Subscribe. I am Peter Hayes, 75 years old, skin toughened by grease and sun, the kind of man whose knuckles carry both scars and stories. For 4 decades, I ran a modest mechanic shop on the edge of Los Angeles, a place where engines coughed themselves back into life under my hands, and neighbors trusted me more than their own warranties. My one wish, plain and steady as a metronome, was to retire in the house I built with Claire, to measure what was left of my years by sunrises through the front porch window and the tick of my own clock, not by anyone else's. My weakness? I worried too much about others. I let their plans eclipse mine, and I handed my voice away like a rusted key I thought nobody wanted. That morning changed everything. I overheard my daughter selling my house while I stood 10 feet away. Imagine that. Your life, your sweat, your walls, turned into an item on someone else's ledger. The radio in my Los Angeles shop hissed a Dodgers inning. The announcer's voice lost in static, while oil-stained papers breathed that old garage smell. Through the cracked door I heard Jessica's voice, sharp and efficient. Nothing like the child who once sat on my lap pointing out shapes and clouds. 6 million, she said, matter of fact, as if reciting a grocery list. Placement, convenience. Tom chimed in, his voice smoother, careful. The way men talk when they want to seem reasonable, but are already too far ahead in their own plan. They sounded like realtors rehearsing a pitch, not family deciding the fate of their father's home. Isn't that something? To be reorganized like a drawer? To hear your years boiled down to square footage and potential market value? My chest went cold and strangely light, the way an engine feels the instant it loses spark. I stood frozen, my hand on the desk where Claire's keys once rattled, listening to the 2 people I should have trusted most talk about me as if I weren't there. No betrayal, no slammed doors, no lies, just erasure. That's what hurt most. The quiet kind, where you're erased in pencil, soft enough to smudge, but final all the same. Do you know that feeling when the air shifts and you realize a chapter of your life has just ended without asking your permission? That's where I stood. My worst habit, my lifelong weakness, was giving in for the sake of peace. Letting them decide, keeping the water smooth, swallowing my own wants until they turned bitter in my stomach. Isn't that how people my age vanish while still breathing? The house was supposed to be my ending, my chair by the window, my slow clock. Why did wanting that feel like theft? I stayed quiet, listening to my child budget my life away, and inside me a stubborn sentence formed like a bolt refusing to turn. Not yet. Do you hear me? Not yet. I pulled the sticky desk drawer, the one that always stuck halfway like it had secrets of its own. And there it was, a small steel memory. The key to Claire's safe deposit box. I hadn't touched it in years. Hadn't even thought of it except in those twilight moments when her absence pressed too hard. Claire, she hummed scales at the piano like a lighthouse beam sweeping across water. She had been practical, secretive too. She always said, prepare for storms, even if the sky looks clear. I never asked what she meant, but I should have. Don't we all hide things in plain sight, waiting for the day someone needs them? I sat in that office, my hand shaking slightly as I held the key. The Dodgers announcer crackled on about bases loaded, but it felt like another man's life, not mine. My hands, these hands that had turned wrenches, patched carburetors, lifted hoods heavy with rust trembled, not from weakness, but from something else. Awakening. I stared at the key as though it were Claire herself looking back, asking, well, Peter, will you finally speak for yourself? Had I been waiting for permission from the dead? Isn't that shameful and tender at once? I closed my fist around the key, and for the first time in years, I felt something stir. Something like ignition, the click before the engine turns. I didn't know exactly what I would find, but I knew this. I couldn't let Jessica and Tom erase me. I couldn't let the house become another line item in their celebratory posts, another proof of their upward climb. This wasn't just wood and nails. It was me. It was Claire. It was our life made solid. That morning, in the oil-stained office where my life had both thrived and withered, I decided to act. Quietly, deliberately, without announcement. The key lay heavy in my pocket, and it felt like the first true choice I'd made in years. What do you think? Was that courage? Or just desperation? Maybe both. But whichever it was, it saved me. The next hours passed in a blur of habit and defiance. I wiped my hands, locked the office, and stepped into the sunlight. Los Angeles smelled of smog and jasmine, that strange mix of grit and sweetness, as if the city itself can't decide what it wants to be. My car, old but steady, coughed awake. I drove without telling anyone, hands tight on the wheel, the key pressing against my thigh through my pocket. Every red light felt like a question. Are you sure? Every green felt like Claire's hand on my shoulder, urging me forward. At the bank, the marble floors echoed with footsteps too clean, too polished. I walked up to the counter like a ghost stepping into daylight. "Safe deposit box," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. The young teller glanced at me, eyes skimming over my age spots, my mechanic's jacket, the faint smell of oil that never leaves me. To him, I was just another old man running an errand. Isn't that funny? How strangers see so little while your life is burning inside you. The attendant led me down a long, cold corridor into the vault. The air smelled metallic, the silence so dense it felt like holding your breath. My hand shook as I fitted the key into the lock, that tiny motion that could alter the entire balance of my days. And when the box slid out, heavy and unassuming, I hesitated. What if it was empty? What if Claire's secret was only another note telling me to hold on, to endure, to keep sacrificing? Could I bear that? I pulled it open, my breath caught. Inside, wrapped in woolen cloth, lay squat, quiet bars of gold. Not money, not the usual currency of banks and heirs, but something older, denser, agency in its most solid form. I touched the cold metal, and it warmed under my skin. Claire hadn't left me riches. She had left me a weapon. A blade to cut through the ropes others would tie around me. A future no one else could script. Do you see? She knew me better than I knew myself. She must have known I'd reached this point, too pliant, too weary, too erased, and that I'd need something undeniable to push me back into my own skin. I laughed, a raw sound swallowed by the steel walls, because for the first time in so long I wasn't afraid. I was awake. I closed the box, the gold's weight already rewriting the air around me. When I left the bank, the sun seemed sharper, the sky less faded. I drove back through Los Angeles traffic, not as a man cornered, but as a man holding a key that unlocked more than a box. It unlocked me, and that was only the beginning. I left the bank with the box empty, the bars of gold transferred into the safe hands of a vault clerk, and a receipt folded neatly into my pocket. It wasn't the paper that gave me strength. It was the knowledge that Claire had trusted me with more than her laughter, more than her stubborn silences. She had trusted me to know when to fight for myself. That gold was not a treasure chest. It was a set of choices. Isn't that what money is when you strip away the greed? A door you can open or close as you see fit. I drove back through Los Angeles, the city's endless arteries clogged with traffic and sunglare. Horns blared, billboards shouted about dreams for sale, and still I felt a strange calm. For years, the city had pressed against me, rushing me, squeezing me, demanding more hours, more repairs, more patience. But that afternoon it felt distant, as if I had stepped slightly to the side of its frantic dance. I was holding a secret now, one that tilted the balance of everything. I went straight to Evelyn Reed. She had been Claire's lawyer, sharp-eyed and precise. The kind of woman who could cut through a man's excuses with a single look. I hadn't seen her in nearly a decade, not since Claire's funeral when she had handled the paperwork with a grace I barely noticed through my grief. Evelyn's office sat on the 12th floor of a glass building downtown, the kind of place where the air always smells faintly of lemon polish and printer ink. When I walked in, Evelyn rose from behind her desk, her silver hair cut close, her suit immaculate. She regarded me with that same piercing gaze that once made Claire laugh and say, Evelyn could stare down a hurricane. "Peter," she said, extending her hand. "It's been too long, I echoed, gripping her hand, surprised at the steadiness of my voice. My palm was rough against her smooth skin, but she didn't flinch. That alone steadied me. I sat down, the receipt heavy in my pocket, and told her everything. Jessica and Tom's conversation, The house, the safe deposit box, the gold. She listened without interruption, her hands folded neatly on the desk. When I finished, silence stretched between us. My heart hammered, waiting for her verdict. Finally, she said, "Claire was smarter than most men ever gave her credit for, and she knew you better than anyone. She left you not just protection, but power. The question is, are you ready to use it?" Her words struck me like a wrench hitting concrete. Ready? I had been passive so long I hardly knew what readiness felt like, but I nodded. "Yes, then we'll do this clean," she said, the corner of her mouth twitching into something like approval. Discreet. No spectacle. And most importantly, no loopholes for Jessica or Tom to exploit. She leaned forward, tapping her pen against a legal pad. "You have enough here to ensure that the house remains yours, beyond question. But I'll ask you again, are you certain you want to keep it? You could sell on your own terms, move somewhere quieter, closer to the sea. Sometimes freedom isn't about holding ground, but choosing new ground." Her words lingered. I thought of the house, the porch Claire and I had painted 3 summers in a row, the window where Jessica once pressed her face against the glass waiting for fireflies, the kitchen where the smell of roast chicken seemed to seep into the very walls. Could I leave it? Or was leaving the only way to keep its meaning alive? "I'll think on that," I said, my voice softer now. "But first, we protect it. We make sure it's mine." Evelyn nodded, already jotting down steps. "We'll need to move quickly. Discreet inquiries, an off-market buyer if you decide to sell, airtight contracts if you stay. Jessica and Tom cannot know until it's done." I left her office with a folder of preliminary documents, my mind spinning with both dread and resolve. As I stepped onto the street, the city roared around me, but inside I felt something rare: momentum. The days that followed became a strained rhythm of secrecy. While Jessica and Tom posted photos of sushi in San Francisco, cocktails on hotel balconies, their lives curated into little squares of triumph, I moved quietly. Evelyn's calls came at odd hours. "We found a buyer interested in properties near the coast. I've drafted a clause that ensures sole ownership. You'll need to sign here, initial there." I obeyed each instruction with the precision of a mechanic following a repair manual. And yet, beneath the paperwork, memories kept surfacing. Cities etched into my life like fingerprints. Las Vegas, where Claire and I had once danced under neon lights, drunk on youth and promises. San Francisco, where we stood on the Golden Gate at dawn, the fog curling around us like a blessing. Chicago, where I took my first winter job as a young man, the river frozen and the air so sharp it burned my lungs. Miami, where Claire and I walked along South Beach, the waves slapping our ankles, her laugh louder than the surf. Boston, where summers meant narrow streets and brick stoops, the smell of baked bread wafting from corner shops. Each city a marker of who we had been, who we had almost become. And always, Los Angeles, the city of our labor, our compromise, our eventual stillness. The city where I built the shop with my hands, where Jessica was born, where Claire died. Could I stay tethered to it, or did I need to unmoor? At night I sat at the piano Claire once played, the notes uneven under my clumsy fingers. I could almost hear her humming along, patient as always. The music reminded me, some things are not for sale. Some things you keep because they are the marrow of who you are. One evening, while Jessica's vacation photos flooded my phone-smiling faces framed by sunsets, wine glasses raised in endless toasts, I spread Evelyn's documents across the kitchen table. The papers rustled like dry leaves, each clause a small shield, each signature a bolt tightened against intrusion. My pen hovered. I felt the weight of choice pressing down. I signed. The ink bled into the paper, binding me to a future no longer shaped by my silence. Isn't that strange? How something as thin as ink can carry the weight of a man's dignity. This was how the journey began, not with shouts or slammed doors, but with quiet lines drawn in legal ink, with the help of a woman who knew storms when she saw them. Jessica and Tom celebrated, oblivious, clinking glasses in Miami, posting captions about new beginnings. And all the while, I was writing my own one that didn't include erasure, one that let me breathe again. What would you have done? Kept the house as a fortress? or sold it to claim a new horizon? I still wasn't sure. But I knew this much. For the first time in years, I was not standing still. The secret lived with me like a second heartbeat. Every day I woke with it pulsing under my ribs. Jessica and Tom had no idea. They were still on their celebratory trip, sipping wine by hotel pools, dressing up their victories in sunsets and hashtags. While back in Los Angeles, I was dismantling their plans piece by piece. Evelyn's voice became a kind of compass for me. Each phone call came with instructions, and I followed as if my very breath depended on it. "Peter," she said one afternoon, her tone clipped but not unkind. "I've arranged for the property to be listed quietly. There's interest already. Off-market, discreet. If you want to move, now is the time. Move." That word rattled me. Wasn't the whole point to stay? To keep the house? To sit in my chair by the window? To measure my life by that familiar clock on the mantel? And yet, when Evelyn spoke of new ground, something inside me stirred. Maybe what I wanted wasn't the house itself, but the right to choose where and how I spent the last stretch of my life. I walked through the room slowly that evening, my fingers trailing across surfaces worn smooth by years of use. The kitchen smelled faintly of onions and soap, the same way it had since Claire first filled the cupboards. The hallway bore the scars of Jessica's childhood pencil marks on the wall where we measured her height. Chipped paint from her roller skates banging too close to the corners. In the bedroom, Claire's perfume lingered in the cedar chest, faint but unmistakable, as though she were still there. The house was alive with ghosts, but they weren't cruel. They were reminders. And reminders, I realized, don't always mean you must stay. I began to imagine another house. A smaller one, perhaps, somewhere near the sea, where the mornings were painted with salt air and the nights ended with the hush of waves. East Hampton came to me not as a plan, but as a whisper. Claire and I had once spent a week there, years ago, when we could still afford small luxuries. We walked along the beach at dawn, the Atlantic gray and endless, and she said, "Peter, this is what I'd want for us when the world quiets down." I had laughed, brushing off the thought. "The world doesn't quiet down," I told her. But she had only smiled, as if she knew better. Now I wondered, was she waiting for me there still, in some sense? Was the house by the sea her final gift, hidden inside that safe deposit box all along? Jessica called once during their trip. "Dad," she said, her voice sugar-coated but rushed. "Tom and I are working out some details with the realtor. Don't stress about anything, we'll handle it." Handle it. Isn't that the phrase people use when they mean, "we'll take it away from you"? I bit back the words I wanted to say, the fury bubbling up like a pot about to boil over. Instead, I answered with something noncommittal. "We'll see, Jessica." She sighed, impatient. "Dad, it's the smart thing. The house is too much for you, and this way you'll be comfortable." Comfortable. As if being erased could ever be comfortable. "I'll think on it," I said, then hung up before she could hear the tremor in my voice. After the call, I sat at the piano. My fingers stumbled through a tune Claire had once loved, a piece she played on quiet nights when the world outside seemed heavier than we could bear. I missed the steadiness of her presence, the way she could anchor me with a look. But the piano, stubborn and out of tune as it was, reminded me her lessons were still here. Play what you can. Keep the melody alive, even if it wavers. Meanwhile, Evelyn and I moved forward. She brought me contracts, clean and firm. She explained every clause, every hidden trap Jessica might one day try to spring. I signed where needed, my signature awkward but determined. Each page felt like laying down a brick in a wall, one Jessica and Tom would never climb. One evening, Evelyn lingered as I signed the final page for the week. "Peter," she said softly, "I've seen families torn apart by less. You need to prepare yourself. Jessica will not understand. She sees this as betrayal." Her words sat heavy between. U.S. Betrayal. Isn't it strange how the word shifts depending on who speaks it? Jessica thought I was betraying her future, but wasn't she betraying my present, my right to exist as more than an obstacle? I met Evelyn's gaze and nodded. She see it that way. "But I have no choice." "There's always a choice," Evelyn said gently. "This time, at least, it's yours." The days stretched on. Jessica and Tom kept posting their perfect trip, smiling with cocktails in Miami, framed against the foggy glow of San Francisco, holding hands in Boston's cobblestone streets. Their happiness looked staged, but perhaps all happiness does when turned into a photograph. I couldn't stop staring at those images, wondering when Jessica had become this person, more invested in appearances than in the roots that had held her steady once. Or had I simply missed it all along, too busy with engines and late nights at the shop? At night I dreamed of the sea, waves pounding, relentless, but also forgiving. I dreamed of Claire, standing barefoot at the shore, beckoning me forward. "Don't linger," she said in the dream. "It's time to move." When I woke, I knew the house was no longer my ending. It was the bridge. East Hampton wasn't just a possibility. It was calling me, and this time I would answer. So the plan shifted. Evelyn helped me line up the buyer discreetly, the contracts drawn so clean they shone. My house, my fortress, my cage was nearly out of Jessica's reach. Soon it would no longer be theirs to claim or mine to guard. It would be gone, yes, but in its place, there would be something greater. Choice. My choice. Do you see it? The shift that happens when you stop defending and start creating. I wasn't only saying no to Jessica and Tom. I was saying yes to Claire's memory, to my own dignity, to mornings by the sea. And though the ache in my chest remained, it was no longer the ache of erasure. It was the ache of becoming new again, even at 75. The day Jessica and Tom returned, the air in the house seemed to shift. I felt it even before their car pulled up, the vibration of inevitability, the weight of a storm about to break. I had prepared everything with Evelyn. The contracts filed, the notices placed, the new arrangements sealed. Still, when I heard their voices at the door, a part of me faltered. Was I ready to face them? Was I ready to look my daughter in the eye and tell her the truth of who I was, after years of playing the weaker part? Jessica's key scraped against the lock, but the door resisted. I had changed it. A legal notice hung on the wood, crisp and undeniable. Tom read it aloud, his voice stumbling as though he couldn't quite believe what his eyes saw. Jessica's gasp cut through the hallway like a blade. "What is this?" she shrieked, pounding the door. "Our house." There it was again, that word. Our. As if my decades of sweat, my nights in the shop, my mornings beside Claire had somehow been communal property for them to inherit by default. My chest burned with equal parts fury and sorrow. Had I raised my daughter so poorly that she could not distinguish between inheritance and theft? Or had I simply allowed her to learn by my silences, by the times I gave up what I wanted in order to keep peace? I opened the door slowly. Jessica's face was flushed, her eyes wet with outrage. Tom stood beside her, jaw tight, holding the notice in one trembling hand. They looked less like victors and more like children caught stealing. "Dad," Jessica snapped, "what is this? What have you done?" I met her gaze, steady now, steadier than I had ever been with her. "I've done what needed to be done." "You sold the house?" she demanded, her voice cracking. "Without telling us?" "It was never yours to sell," I said. My words came slow, each one deliberate, set like bolts turned to the right torque. It was mine. Mine and Claire's. Always. Jessica shook her head violently, as though trying to fling my words away. "You don't understand. This was for you. We wanted you comfortable, safe. We had plans. Plans that erased me," I cut in, sharper than I intended. Plans that spoke about me as if I were a burden to be placed. "I heard you, Jessica." I heard every word. Her mouth fell open, her face draining of color. "You were listening?" "Yes," I said simply, and it broke something in me. But it also woke something. I will not be erased. Tom cleared his throat, trying for reason. "Peter, maybe we can renegotiate. Maybe we can come to an arrangement that satisfies everyone." I almost laughed, though there was no humor in it. "This isn't about arrangements, Tom. This is about dignity. I've signed the papers. It's done." Jessica's eyes brimmed with tears now, her anger slipping into grief. "You've betrayed us," she whispered. "You've betrayed your own daughter." The word struck me deep. Betrayal. Such a heavy word, one I had turned over in my own mind too many times. I thought of Evelyn's warning, of how Jessica would see it this way. I took a breath, steadying myself against the tide of her accusation. "I didn't betray you," I said softly, almost gently. "I betrayed myself for years. I let my silence give you permission to plan over me, to decide for me. That ends now." Jessica covered her face with her hands, sobbing, while Tom pulled her close. The sight tore at me. I wanted to reach out, to comfort her as I had when she was small, when her scraped knees or broken toys seemed like the end of the world. But I held still. Comfort, in this moment, would be another erasure of myself. I couldn't afford that anymore. The confrontation bled into hours. Voices raised, accusations hurled, silences stretched too long. At one point, Jessica spat. "Do you even care what happens to me, to us?" I looked at her, really looked at her. The lines of ambition etched into her young face, the desperation behind her eyes. I cared. Of course I cared. But care does not mean surrender. "I care enough," I said, "to show you what it means to live by your own hand. Maybe one day you'll understand." She turned away, muttering through tears, "I'll never forgive you." Her words landed with finality, but not with the devastation I expected. For once, I did not crumble under the threat of her disapproval. Instead, I felt a strange, quiet strength. Forgiveness was not a currency I could buy. It was hers to give or withhold. My task was different: to hold the line, to keep my dignity intact, to live the life Claire had wanted for me. When they finally left, the house seemed to exhale. Silence spread through the rooms, not heavy this time, but cleansing. I walked to the mantel where Claire's photograph stood. Her smile, small, knowing, eternal, seemed to echo Evelyn's words. "This time, at least, it's yours." I whispered to the photograph, my voice steady. "It's done, Claire." I chose. The Atlantic still waited, a promise on the horizon. East Hampton, the house by the sea, mornings of salt and sand. My future no longer belonged to anyone else's ledger. It was mine, fragile but real. Isn't it strange how a life can turn not on battles or victories, but on signatures and silences? On a single decision to stand. That day, amid the tears and accusations, I claimed myself back. And though Jessica's words still rang in my ears, betrayal, unforgivable, I knew the truth. Sometimes the most loving act is the one that looks like defiance. That night, after Jessica and Tom left with their fury and their tears, I sat alone in the house. The silence was thick, layered with echoes of their accusations, their disbelief. "Betrayal," Jessica had said, her voice cracking. The word replayed in my head until it dulled into something else, something almost hollow. I poured myself a glass of water and sat at the kitchen table, staring at the faint rings left on the wood by decades of cups and plates. Claire's hand had polished this table more times than I could count. She had kept it smooth, patient, uncomplaining. I had kept myself the same way for others, for peace, for the illusion of love. And what had it bought me? A daughter who mistook my silence for consent. I pressed my palms flat on the table, feeling the grooves in the grain, and whispered into the quiet. Was it betrayal, Claire? Or was it freedom? The truth rose slowly, like dawn breaking. I hadn't betrayed anyone. I had released myself. I had stepped out from under the shadow of their plans, their projections, their fears. For years I believed that being indispensable, fixing cars on Sundays, saying yes when I wanted to say no, working myself ragged to pay for Jessica's dreams, was the same as being loved. What a cruel mistake. Love that requires you to vanish is not love. It's a bargain made of fear. I thought about fear that night, its many disguises. Jessica's voice on the phone, calling her takeover comfort. Tom's calm insistence on placement and smart decisions. Weren't those just different faces of fear? Fear of aging, of loss, of mortality, all dressed up as planning. Fear makes us accountants of each other's lives, tallying convenience and cost instead of listening to the deeper need. To be seen, to be allowed to remain whole. They hadn't meant cruelty. They had meant control. And maybe, in their eyes, control looked like care. Isn't that the most dangerous confusion of all? I stood and wandered into the living room. The piano waited, dust on its lid, silence in its strings. I lifted the cover and pressed a single key. The note wavered, half flat, but it carried. Claire used to sit here at night, her fingers steady, her humming soft and certain. She never played for applause. She played for air, for breath, for herself. I realized then, The piano was her lesson all along. Keep what sustains you, even if no one else listens. Play because it keeps you alive. I played a clumsy melody that night. Chords broken, tempo uneven, but I played. Each note felt like a confession, each pause like forgiveness. And as the sound filled the room, I felt Claire closer than I had in years. Not as a ghost, not as memory, but as presence. The quiet insistence that I had done right, that I was still capable of living, not just enduring. When I stopped, the silence returned, but it no longer felt empty. It felt earned. Later, lying in bed, I thought of the gold bars again. Cold, dense, undeniable. Claire had left me more than wealth. She had left me permission. Permission to stop begging for love in the form of usefulness. Permission to stop handing my voice over like a rusted key. Permission to live on my own terms. Isn't it strange that we sometimes need the dead to remind us to live? I understood then that my inheritance wasn't the house, or the gold, or even the comfort of security. My true inheritance was choice. The freedom to choose mornings by the sea, the freedom to keep the piano, the freedom to breathe without apology. Claire's final gift was not safety, it was dignity. I rose before dawn, restless, and stepped outside. The sky was still ink dark, the streetlights humming, the city half asleep. A chill sat in the air, that rare coolness Los Angeles grants before the sun turns the streets into ovens. I breathed deeply. For once, I felt no urgency, no schedule pressing down. Jessica's words still hurt, her accusation, her refusal to forgive, but I no longer felt the instinct to fix it. Some wounds must sit, must fester or heal in their own time. My task was different now, to live the lesson Claire had left. And so I whispered into the gray morning, as if to her, as if to myself, I am not gone. I am not erased. The words lingered in the air, fragile and strong all at once. And for the first time in years, I believed them. East Hampton. The name itself felt like a promise when I first arrived. The air cooler, the horizon endless. I had signed the final papers, tied every knot Evelyn placed before me, and now the Atlantic waited just beyond the dunes. The move had not been dramatic, no shouting, no tearful farewells. I packed my clothes, a few tools, Claire's photograph, and, most importantly, the piano. Movers hauled it carefully into the new house. Their faces strained as though they carried more than strings. They did. They carried memory, continuity, the one piece of my life that had to remain intact. The house was smaller, sunlit, with floors that creaked underfoot and windows that welcomed the sea air like an old friend. On my first morning there, I brewed coffee in a kitchen that smelled of salt and paint and stepped onto the porch. The ocean spread before me, restless and alive. I walked down to the sand, shoes in hand, and let the waves lap my ankles. Cold, bracing, honest. Isn't it something how water reminds you of your own pulse? I stood there until the sun broke fully over the horizon, painting the water in streaks of gold, and whispered, I did it. Claire, days began to shape themselves differently here. No more shop hours, no more waiting for customers to drop off sputtering engines. Instead, mornings were mine. I oiled the front door hinges until even the house seemed to agree with me. I cooked for myself simple meals, eggs and toast, stews simmered slow, and for the first time in years, I sat at the table without rushing, without distraction. I played the piano, stumbling through songs until they began to smooth. Sometimes I caught myself laughing at my own mistakes, and I could almost hear Claire laughing too. The radio kept me company, voices drifting in from other cities. Los Angeles laughter, Chicago's long howl, San Francisco's foghorn, Miami's fever. They were memories now, guests in my quiet house. They no longer dictated my days. I switched the dial when I pleased, turned it off when I wanted silence. Do you see the power in that small act? To choose your own noise, your own quiet? Neighbors began to notice me. An older woman down the street, Margaret, asked one morning if I could look at some papers her nephew had brought her. He says selling the cottage will make things easier, she explained, her hands shaking as she held out the documents. Easier, that word again. I read through the fine print, catching clauses designed to trap her, to strip her control. I told her what to circle, what to question, and gave her Evelyn's number. Don't sign until someone you trust explains it, I said. She looked at me with tears in her eyes and whispered, "Thank you." Soon, others came. A man worried his children wanted to move him into a facility. A couple unsure about a joint signature. I became, in a way, a mentor not about engines anymore, but about dignity. How to protect what was theirs. How to say no without apology. How to write their limits in ink. I never charged them. It felt like repayment for the years I had been silent, for the lesson I had learned too late but not too late to share. Evenings were my own reward. I walked the beach at dusk, the sky bleeding pink and orange, the gulls wheeling overhead. I sat on the porch and listened to the waves, the eternal rhythm that reminded me I was still alive. Some nights I poured a small glass of whiskey, raised it toward Claire's photo, and said softly, "We made it." Other nights, I played the piano until the house hummed with music, imperfect but real. Do I miss Jessica? Yes. The ache is constant, like an old injury that flares in the cold. I hold it carefully, like a hot mug, both comfort and warning. Maybe one day she will understand, maybe not. But I no longer trade my dignity for her approval. That, I think, is the truest form of love I can offer her now. To stand, so she might one day learn to stand too. East Hampton gave me balance. A life not loud, not grand, but mine. The reward was not riches or reconciliation, but mornings unclaimed by anyone else. Isn't that enough? To wake when you want, to breathe salt air, to play what you please, to choose your own silence? For me, it is everything. If my voice reaches you now, let it be a warning, or maybe a small light. I lived most of my years giving in, smoothing the waters, trading pieces of myself so others could feel at ease. Do you know where that road leads? To erasure. To silence that feels like safety until it swallows you whole. Don't wait as long as I did. Don't hand over the key that belongs only to you. Not even to the people you love most. Especially not to families mean well, yes. They call it comfort, convenience, safety. They speak of making things easier, as if your life were a mess of cords to untangle, as if the simplest solution is always the kindest. But hear me, ease is not always love. Love does not erase. Love makes room. If they come to you with ledgers and plans that leave no place for your breath, pause. Ask yourself, who benefits from this arrangement, and where do you disappear in it? Claire knew. That's why she left me the key. Not just the gold, not just the security, but to myself. Her lesson was written not in words, but in silence, in that box waiting patiently until I was desperate enough to open it. She had trusted me to find my way back, to remember that freedom is not given, it is claimed. Now, in the mornings, I walk the sand and feel the ocean write its grammar against my ankles. I play the piano, clumsy but earnest, each note a small act of resistance against forgetting. I sit with neighbors who fear being erased by their own children, and I tell them, sign slowly, read every clause. Protect your dignity the way you protect your breath, because once it's gone, once you hand it over, getting it back is the hardest repair of all. Do you hear me? Write your limits in stone. Write your loves in music. Don't surrender them for the sake of making things easier. That's the oldest trick in the bookies that empties you. If someone asks for your key, literal or otherwise, don't give it without reading the score of your own dignity first. Would you have done what I did? I ask myself that often. Perhaps you would have done it sooner. If so, good. Learn from my delay. Save yourself the years of silence. Move toward the house that fits your breath, whether it faces the loud streets of Los Angeles or the long hush of the Atlantic. Stand where you can say, without apology, this is mine. This is me. When the pen is in your hand, hold it steady. Sign for yourself. And never forget, you are not a burden to be placed. You are the author of your own ending. Thank you for staying with me, for listening this far. Your attention is a rare and precious gift. These minutes you've spent here mean the world. And if this story meant something to you, if it touched you in some way, and you feel it might stay with you, then please, do this for me. Follow the channel. Every follow, every subscription is more than a number. It's the fuel that allows me to keep bringing you stories that connect us. And I want to keep building this journey with you. Until next time.